Yo, YouTube, GK back, and we're gonna do chapter 16. I'm really excited. This novella is getting really good, and it's just interesting overall. So let's just get into it. This is a very long chapter. I don't really want to recap and stuff. I kind of want to keep them shorter. In the hopes that you guys can just simply view it, relax, hear it, and keep moving on along. I know it takes a little longer to have it read to you, but I'll try this out, especially since I definitely want to talk about this a lot in coming installments, and definitely the X2 universe, the 10 universe, and then X3. So let's just get into it. So chapter 16. They took the path towards the inland and quickly reached a fork. If they were in Besaid, the right path would lead them to the ruins, but they had struggled with a river they could have only crossed by swimming. The two young ones considered having spent enough time in the water today and decided to turn around. They climbed a steep slope and then they took the direction of the waterfall's path. Thirsty, they were dreaming of fresh water falling from the cliff. It really does look like Besaid, Titus noticed. That's right, yet something is strange. I can see remnants of human occupation, but they evoke a people different from ours. She stopped to examine a stone statue on the verge. It reached their knees and represented a man, but because of time and elements, the details had faded and the back had disappeared. He has a beard and a staff. It's an old man, Una said. A high summoner, Titus suggested. The young woman shook her head, as she was not convinced. They stood before the statue for a few moments, but did not discover anything about it. They set off and felt soon the atmosphere culling off. The rubble of the water finally reached them. They rushed forward at the double while betting on the one who would get there first. The waterfall's path reached a cliff, in a place where a river was throwing itself into the void. The air was always fresh here, even in the middle of the hottest of days. Of course, the description matched Besaid's one, but this unknown island did not disappoint them. Under this thin rain, Una raised her face and opened her mouth. Titus imitated her. It feels so good, the young woman rejoiced. The fresh water was dissipating the burning sensation on her entire body. I feel like a new person. Her partner went further. Yes. You think, Titus started, hesitant, you think we've drowned? So we would be dead. I don't know. I never died, Una answered. Titus burst out laughing, yet the young girl had not wanted to mess around. A lot of factors allowed living beings to remain after their death. She was thinking about Unsense, like Arn, the legendary guardian who 2 years earlier had guided them during their journey. Seymour and the great Maester Micah had chosen this path too. Someone greatly attached to this world could continue to lead a life almost unchanged, and nobody would ever notice otherwise. Faith, indispensable for every summoning, spent eternity between life and death. Aeons deceased who appear in the hereafter, much like a good half of monsters, and every sin could be considered as incarnate spirits. Death had not stopped. When the young girl finished her explanation, Titus appeared to shiver. I prefer not to think about all that. Let's say we're really alive, and let's move on to something else. It's you who broached the subject, but fine. What do you want to talk about? For example, what do you remember? Do you remember the shark and our swimming? Yes. I've seen the island far away, and I hoped it was Besaid. Then I've swallowed water twice, I've spitted, and I wanted to vomit. I've been in pain for a moment, and then nothing else. Titus was looking at her, visibly tense. She smiled at him. I've woken up on the beach. I don't know what happened between those 2 moments. He lowered his eyes, and she wondered what he was thinking. When he raised his head, his face was serious. I want to tell you something important. Don't ever give up. Don't sacrifice yourself for my sake. Living without you, I don't want that. I have something to tell you, too. Her hands on her hips, she stared at him. It wasn't easy. It never was, but you saved me so many times in the past, and I don't want to call for your help anymore. I lived without you, and I don't want this to happen again. Well, I don't know what I'll do if it happens once again, but I'm sure something. I refuse to request help from someone who disdains mine. What are you talking about? In the water, you were exhausted, and in the end, both of us drowned. I'm sorry. It will take some time for me to forgive you. She shook her head so hard that her wet hairs fluttered around her. Then she left in the direction of the village. Assuming they were in Besaid, Titus followed in her steps, whispering new apologies. Una told him that was weighing on her. Now she was feeling better. And you, what do you remember? She asked him. I had the impression that my father had come to save us. He was huge. He spread his arms to illustrate his words. Maybe it was a hallucination, he continued. Anyway, we were very lucky. For sure, they were very fortunate. She decided to be grateful without trying to know more about this. 2 years earlier, she would have decided it a gift of Yevon. But this sensation, the fact that it's impossible for us to stay if it's real or imaginary, Titus continued. I had the impression I was taken back 2 years ago, when Sin took me here. She did not answer. After a few quiet moments, he started to talk more loudly. What if it was the same thing right now, as if we were in Besaid, but from another world? I don't know. It's another world, I'm sure it is, he repeated. Why not? After all, he had already witnessed a similar situation, and it had taken him some time to understand it. In this case, can we go back home? The question seemed natural for her, but surprise was written on Titus' face. They were not the same state of mind, apparently. I'm cold. Let's move, she declared joyfully before setting off. If they were in Besaid, the village should not be too far. They had just to go through the ruins path and come back down on the other side. She did not know if Titus was right, but this theory had the advantage to clarify a muddled situation. They were walking in silence. Yuna would have wanted to comment on the characteristic of the landscape, but Titus was staying several steps behind, as if he was upset. He had been delighted to be with her in this world, not forever, of course, but until they find a way to return home, they could explore the island, exchange caresses and kisses. He did not think about those who were worried about them. He was not preoccupied with this. I thought he knew me better than that. I am always concerned about others. Look, Yuna, it's amazing, he suddenly exclaimed, lively. She turned around, but he was showing a spot above her head. She turned around once again and discovered a sparkling orange tower. It's so bright, it looks like a brand new one. They were standing on the ruins path, yet the construction in front of them could have been painted the day before. With a cry of surprise, Titus rushed towards the foot of the structure. That's from where Kamari jumped. He was right. It was indeed the same place, but yet... Oh, Yuna, it's working. He beckoned to her, and she complied. Closely, we could indeed hear a slight whirring. I wonder what it's used for, she whispered. He shrugged to show his ignorance. What about the village? He said suddenly. He left at the double in the direction of it, and she hurried behind him. Titus was shuffling, waiting for Yuna. In Besaid, the pass where he stood overhung the village. A steel designed to protect travelers was supposed to be rising at the edge of the path. Yuna caught up with her partner and lowered her eyes. The village was not there, but everything else here matched her memories. Come over here, he said. He was examining a stone statue that rose in place of the steel. It was depicting a young man, life-size, sitting on a pedestal. Even if the details had faded through time, the figure was still recognizable. The man who was represented had rather thin wrists and ankles and a chest, Titus noticed. It's a girl. Her hands have disappeared, but I think she's praying like this. He turned talk into action. He guessed right. Yuna approached the statue in order to examine it closely. She has wings, Titus said, now standing behind the statue. And look, there's an inscription on the base. Yuna came beside him. Let's see. Lucera. The young man continued. Maybe the name of the model who posed for this work? Probably. I wonder who she is. If people have erected a statue, she must have been famous, Titus noticed, on the island and elsewhere, but I don't know anything about Spear's history, so Yuna was more educated than him about this point, but the name Lucera did not ring a bell. Look, he was pointing at the place where the village should have been. It must be what Lucera is looking at, and she's praying. That means there's something down there. From where they were standing, they could only see a forest. As Yuna guessed, they did not find anything special where the village should have been standing. Her grass and the dense trees constituted a forest typical of the southern islands, rustling with familiar insects. It's the same island, yet different. I think you're right, Titus. We must return to our world. Titus answered with a serious voice. Why? For 1,000 years, machines have been forbidden by Yevon's teachings, right? However, we heard the tower working. The village doesn't exist, but the same goes for the shrine. What if Yevon's teachings had not reached it? Not at the time, at least. She nodded slowly. War was raging before the precepts, right? Yes. Riku told me about Shuyin and Len. I wonder if we're in their time, so we're 1,000 years back in time? I don't ever want to find myself in the middle of fights. I heard say that summoners were sent to the front. Ah. Since he had started to set out this theory, she was only answering with monosyllables. She was not able to think. His words were frightening her because he was most probably right. Don't worry, there must be a way to return home. Are you sure about that? If there was a way to return, she wanted to know it. Maybe it would manage to appease her anxiety. If we can pass in one direction, we can do the same in another. Like Sin, it picked me up from Xanarkand and has taken me to your world. Same goes for Auron. That must be why I saw my father before our arrival. He wanted me to understand that we could do the same thing in the other direction. Yuna thought that his logic was a bit fragile, but she was grateful towards him because he was trying to do his best to reassure her. Thanks, that's kind of you. He appeared to be relieved when he saw her accepting his reasoning. So let's go, he said. Where? Well, we're going to explore the island and find a way to return home. One of the vaguest objectives, but she could not find anything better, hence she followed in his footsteps. They were climbing back up the pass, and Yuna let out a cry of exclamation. What's wrong? The path, what is it? Where does it lead? Since the village doesn't exist, lots of people must have passed through to shape it. I hadn't thought of that. It could just have been some rambler. The place is kind of pretty. You think so? I don't know. It was just an idea. He may be right once again. Oh, Titus exclaimed. He hurried into the hair grass. Come over here. He had found another statue representing an old man, which had prevented more details from the previous one. This area was certainly safer against the elements. He has a staff, Titus noticed, and a bag on his back. He reminds me of Owaka, he said, still laughing. She imitated him. Owaka the 23rd was a merchant that had met during their journey in spirit. People could see him in a lot of places, and he devoted himself to keeping his business running. Maybe it's his island, Titus continued. After all, he was the 23rd. Look at his staff. It's not the same as the one on the other statue, Yuna noticed. Yes, this part there. He was pointing at a little horizontal bar, and the hand of the wrinkly on the one side a beak was engraved, and the other part a big cattail. This beak, Titus began. He followed the drawing with his finger before pointing at the direction indicated by the bar. Yuna only saw a clump of trees with big trunks, certainly centenarian. Titus rushed towards them in order to examine them. Everything seems right, but I wonder what the meaning of these symbols is. Yuna looked around her. The corpse in question was no different from the other one. She cast her eye over the statue again and tried to remember the one they had found earlier. Stay here. I'm going to make sure of something. I'll be back. She rushed forwards on the path in direction of the waterfalls. Where are you going? To find Owaka. They passed the statue of Lucera and took to the road for the ruins again. The first statue, designating the old man, looked like the one they had found near the forest. They took the same model and slightly modified his poising, Yuna concluded, but it isn't Owaka. No, and we may never know who it is, but look, there, the beak. It appeared that it was indicating direction of the second statue near the forest. Let's go back and see, she shouted, and she left all in haste, abandoning a taken aback Titus. I didn't know you were so impatient, he said when he caught up with her. I've spent too much time waiting. I only came back yesterday. You could be gentler with me. I would like to, but you spend your days complaining. Fine, I didn't say anything. Alright, so that was chapter 16. 17 looks like a long one too, but no, we'll have to save that for another time. It's tough because number one, I don't know how to get you guys to watch these videos, and number two, even longer videos just doesn't seem to be the answer, even though 17 and 18 are very long, as well as 19. Maybe I could try some automated reading, so maybe my voice isn't exactly doing it for everybody. I could try to type it into some kind of program to which the voice will just read it, and that may be a solution to the problem. So who knows? But that was an interesting chapter. That island, like I was saying, isn't really Besaid, but we're not going to talk about it all. Here, we'll definitely talk about all of the next 13 or 14 chapters in the Arc 2 recap. Stay tuned. I'm GK. Have a good day. we're going to try a reader. So this is chapter 17. I hope it works. I'm recording this a little weirdly, so let's just see.
They held a meeting in the shade of the trees standing in the waterfall's path. Their priority was the meticulous exploration of the island. Assuming that they would meet inhabitants, they should show them they did not have the intention of doing something bad. The two young people also agreed to stay on watch and detect every hostile person, in order to take flight. If they were parted from each other, they would meet on the beach where they had washed up. I think that's all, Titus concluded. Those statues are intriguing me, Yuna added. If we find another one, I want to examine it. Titus acquiesced, and she resumed. There certainly must be someone living on this island. I hope the populace is not hostile. Same here. But even if they're hostile, they'll definitely become milder when they'll see you. Why? He pointed out Yuna's body. The young woman was only wearing a black bikini. I think I'll never get used to seeing you wearing that. It's arousing. I hope you won't be mad with me being so frank. Why do you sound so proud? He blushed. To hide my embarrassment, he confessed with a little laugh. They started to explore the island in every nook and cranny, without neglecting one path, even if it has just been traced by animals. They found other statues representing some old men, and all of them had a common trait. The staff always indicates dead-end paths, a cliff that overhangs the sea, a scree, a copse of trees too dense to go through. Titus summed up. That's right. I wonder if it doesn't make sense. Why not show us the path to follow, rather than the obstacles to avoid? It would be more practical, really. But on such an island, people don't need signs. Therefore the statues must be there for the foreigners. Like us, for example. But if we follow the indications, it leads us to a cliff. What are we supposed to understand? That it's dangerous? It's a waste of time. Without taking into account the fact that we could fall at night and break our necks. What a deceitful old man. Those statues would be there to waste visitors' time, or lead them to fall from the cliff, the young woman summarized. I would like to have a weapon, Titus declared. Close in my case. By dint of passing through the shrubs, I scratched myself everywhere. I'm afraid that those who could offer you their wardrobe would prefer to throw us in the sea. I think it's unlikely. I'm willing to think that those who live there are friendly, and that the statues warn us of danger. Maybe are they there to prevent kids from getting lost or hurting themselves while they're playing? It was making more sense for her. Well, it's clear now, she continued. In your opinion, where can we find most people? We've only found trees where the village should have been, he reminded her. Maybe should we forget the Besaid we currently know? Okay, but at your home, inhabitants settled there for a good reason, I guess. The shrine has been built first, then the workers settled in around it. Why building it in this place? To prevent sin from destroying it. But we've found no building on this island. Sin must probably not exist in this time. If we've been taken back 1,000 years. She pouted. I don't know if we can be certain about this date. Titus folded his arms and raised his eyes to heaven. I'd like to return to the place where the village should have been standing, he said. Is it okay for you? Why? This dear Lutra is intriguing me. Why is she up there, turned to this specific place? I have the impression that she's more important than the old man. All right, let's go. They were taking, for the second time, a path which led nowhere, when they noticed that another path broke away from it. Without conferring, they held hands and hurried to it. Yuna quickly discovered a piece of fabric fastened highly in a tree. A little farther down the path they found a second one, then a third one, and these hare and hounds led them deep into the forest. These fabrics had not been fastened at the same time. Some of them were washed out and ripped, whereas others, newer, were green like the leaves. Over there, Titus shouted joyfully every time he found a new piece of fabric. He was running from one to another without caring about the branches which were smacking him. Yuna, in her case, wanted to find clothes more than ever. The scratches on her body were not painful, but irritating. "You're lagging behind, Yuna." I'm coming, she answered without enthusiasm. Titus stopped himself and turned around. "Show a bit more enthusiasm, we are going to find someone soon, and the solution to all our problems." He cannot be so naive, she thought. Whosoever hid so carefully deep into the forest did not welcome intruders with open arms. "You know, Yuna, Oren told me one day that you were difficult to read. However, your face reflects all of your emotions." She pressed her hands against her cheeks. "Absolutely not." "I'm sorry," he continued. "I've only been complaining since my return. I'm too impatient." He opened and closed his mouth several times before resuming with difficulty. "From your point of view, I've disappeared for 2 years. That's not insignificant, but yet, you've welcomed me as if we had been separated the day before. I must thank you. As soon as I'm silent or tired, he thinks I'm mad with him and he becomes angry or apologizes. I would like him to stop talking about this." He must have read what she was thinking about on her face, because he continued. "I'll be done soon, but I wanted to tell you that I intended to regain your confidence. And to do so, I must stop behaving like a spoiled child. I must pull myself together, become a good man, like Oren. Back then I thought he was a pain in the neck, but now I know I want to be like him. And if I manage to do so, you." She acquiesced, but she wanted to laugh. He could have put into practice this resolution without saying such a thing, but he had done it to be sure that she knows what efforts he was going to produce. What a child. He was thirsty for recognition and safety, and she could not ignore his lack of maturity. This is why they had quarreled several times while they had just met again. 2 years. For 2 years, time had stopped for Titus. 17 and 19 years old. 20 and 22. 25 and 27. For the moment their age difference was a problem, but if they stayed together for a long time it would fade away. He irritated her sometimes, despite everything she had not changed her mind, she wanted to age by his side. This was her will since their first meeting. "What are you thinking about?" Titus asked. "Why?" "You're smiling." "That's a secret." "Yuna," he answered with a begging tone. It was funny and moving. "Ouch." He rubbed himself on the back of his head before turning around. A balloon, similar to a blitz ball, was rolling slowly at his foot. "I wonder who its owner is." The young man was taken back whilst looking around him. He took a step forward to pick up the object, and Yuna felt tears stinging her eyes. Her legs were shivering. She squatted and folded her arms around her shoulders. She was suddenly overwhelmed by an unbearable sadness. A powerful roar sounded through the air, and the young woman was thrown backwards. An object fell beside her. No, not an object, it was Titus. His face was showing an expression of surprise. But only his head was visible, his body had disappeared. Yuna lost consciousness. Think of him. His name is Titus, right? An unknown voice was murmuring in Yuna's ears. Yes, she answered. And you, who are you? I am, in this world, I may consider myself as a divinity. A god. The voice carried on after a silence. Do not worry about me. You must only think about him. Okay. It was an unfortunate accident. Excuse me. You do not know what happened, right? Tell me more about him, please. How did you meet? It was the day I became a summoner. It was the first time I was establishing a link with Valifer. When Tidus appeared, I knew immediately that he was different from the other men. No, I think he is a very normal man. Tell me more. How much do you love him? Think about it. Okay. Are you crying? I remember the day when I realized I could not tell him my feelings. Think about happy moments, if there was any. Very well. I will now use some of my magic, but it will not be easy. I understand. I cannot erase your memories, only seal them. However, something may release them. Do you understand? Yes. Great. Let us resume. You met him the day you became a summoner, then what? Every moment spent with Tidus spread out in front of Yuna, and all of these memories flew past her like grains of sand, and into a tight fist. Whose is this hand? The young girl asked. Her question did not find an answer. The owner of the fist was hidden in the darkness. However, Yuna's mind was certain. This is yours. She grabbed it and put it against her cheek.
Yo, YouTube, it worked. I'm so excited. I'm going to play around with it more. This was the official test run. And it frees up that, I'm listening to it, and I can get the experience of how you would be listening to it. Wow. That's all I can really say at the moment. There's some things I like, some things I really don't. Just right off the top, I don't like the way Eunice said Titus is not mature. I just feel like that's such a lame, thing to say, especially given their whole journey into Final Fantasy X. I just think that was just lame. And then obviously the big one, Lucera, this god, she says to them, which she recognizes she isn't really a god. She's just a god to the people, to her, to Yuna, and to the people of that world. That's very interesting and key, because we learned a lot of that in previous chapters in Arc 1. Oh, I'm so excited about the reader. I might even post the next 3 chapters this way. If those scratchings in the background and the movement, there are some ambient noises I can't help, but I was working on another video while this was playing. As I said, I'm recording this a little bit differently. I'm using my microphone and playing it through my computer, so that way I can listen to it. And I'm working on a drawing video, which I want to post later as well. I'm doing some Beyond Good and Evil 2 stuff. So that was the scratches, but you probably won't hear too much of it, and my creaky chair, because of the music in the background. So stay tuned. I'll see what else I can do around the web, but I liked the way that came out. Even though they changed my pronunciation of Titus to Titus, it's official. So I'm GK, have a good day. So pumped. Yo, YouTube. We're gonna keep this train going, so here we go.
He must be in a farther place, Tidus concluded. But Yuna was thinking of another possibility. He may not be prone to meet her. Few people knew that when it came to summoning, the initiative was not the job of summoners, but Faith's. You're right, yet, she answered. He's not here. His chamber must be located at the end of the hallway, quite near the room where we've woken up. Let's go, Tidus said. He set foot on stairs which connected the circular room to the corridor. No, wait. Why? Before that,
I want to know more about this place. We are not in the world of Yevon, and... Yuna seemed to look for words. Titus waited. Summoner and Faith must establish an intimate link, she continued. Many ways exist to do so, even according to the teachings, and the method may be different, depending on the faith. Titus put his forefinger on Yuna's lips. I understand. You're scared? She nodded slowly. Then let's forget that. I don't like this story about intimate links. What if the faith was a man? He forced himself to laugh, but without any real feeling. Her eyes aiming at the top of the stairs, Yuna sighed. Never would have she thought that she would fear summoning. She had not practiced for 2 years. During this period of time, she had changed. She knew that if she felt the Ian could devour her mind. She did not want to run this risk anymore. Fear was tormenting her. But did she have the choice? She was just starting to foresee a way to go back to her world. Titus opened a door located under the stairs, on the left. The number 1, barely visible, was written. Imp said, it led to the cells of the monks. They were making out an inclined plane which sank into the dark. They could smell a strong metallic scent. They crossed the threshold and perceived a slight vibration. Yuna remembered the mechanic tower they had heard work on the path of the ruins. They arrived in a room even more vast than the one they had just left. The place was overflowing with unknown machines, positioned around a long table and a single chair. Furniture was crumbling under a piling up of tools. Everything was covered with a thick coat of dust, except for a narrow strip on the floor. These machines were used to build other ones, Titus whispered. It's a workshop, Yuna acquiesced. Shinra had told her about those workshops, or factories. According to the boy, the ancient world must have been overflowing with places like this one, judging from the number of machines that had bequeathed to them. What a smell. Titus grimaced. Let's take a quick look and let's go out of this place. Look, there's a door at the end. He rushed for it and opened it without hesitation. I've found beds, he announced. Bunk beds. The room is huge. 100 people could sleep there. But there's such a stench prevailing in this room. He closed the lid with a pout of disgust and met Yuna. After a brief overview of the room, he pointed out another way out. This way. Come here, Yuna. A simple glance in this room had been enough for Titus to understand its function. It was an armory. He did not know what was supposed to happen in the future, but he could not let escape such an opportunity. 3 walls were hidden by shelves which were displaying all kinds of swords. They entered and discovered points of arrows, top of weapon mallets and blades of axes. Yuna assumed that the handles, much as the other parts made of wood, had disintegrated. Everything is rusty, but we can still use some of these weapons, Titus noticed. He was holding a rapier in his left hand and let his right one hanging around the shelves, as if he was looking for a specific object. You should choose a weapon, he recommended to her. The young woman was not delighted at all by this, but a weapon may indeed be useful. Ah, that's it, Titus exclaimed. He was brandishing a little cobblestone. This is a whetstone, he explained. We must get rid of this rust. You've done it before? Never. But it must be like with kitchen knives, right? Probably. They spent half an hour gathering and preparing their arsenal. Titus had chosen a double-edged rapier equipped with a bell-shaped guard, and Yuna a dagger. It was a light weapon, with a magnificently polished handle. The young woman wrapped it in a long strip coming from the hem of her dress. There you go, Titus exclaimed joyfully, while brandishing his rapier. But he was already frowning. Something's wrong? I got carried away. In my opinion, I've sharpened it too much. I didn't know rust could penetrate the blade. I thought it was superficial. I see. Yuna answered, who was ignorant of this too. She was anxious, because she was used to buying or receiving weapons, but that was not the case for assembly. I hope we won't meet anybody, she added. Me neither. They left the armory and, for lack of rooms to visit, went back up to the circular room. Over here, now. Titus declared lightly before opening the door located under the stairs, on the right. Yuna read the number 2 on it. The lead was jammed. The young man had to pull with all his strength to make it move. So, what's in there? He continued. Yuna was recognizing him well right now. When he was anxious, he adopted a playful tone. A refectory, I would bet my life on it, he continued. There are long metallic tables and chairs. And at the end, it seems to be a kitchen. You want us to explore it? Yuna shook her head. She understood that her partner wanted to postpone their meeting with the Faith, and she appreciated it. But they had waited long enough. She turned towards the top of the stairs. Let's go. Titus got in her way. Don't you want to breathe fresh air before that? Obstinate, she shook her head even more.
And we're back. Ooh, it's getting juicy. I would love to try to draw Titus with his new rapier sword and Yuna with her dagger. I realized I kind of glanced over something. That bomb scene was definitely not how critics and other people have described the way that scene it goes down and how silly it seemed. Oh boy, did they make that into something it wasn't. Very disappointed with that. It was, again, like I was saying, the whole story describes multiple people say that those balls, they look like balls or blitz balls, or they don't look like bombs. And Titus got caught by that just as other people did in the wartime when it was more commonplace to even see them. So anyone saying that kind of stuff, like, oh, it's dumb or this or that, really obviously didn't read it or are listening to it or anything, and they're just going off what they heard someone else say. Well, that is the way the world goes, but it's kind of apparent now that those kind of people are way wrong, and hopefully I can shed light on this episode I'll be dropping for the read-through with the title or something a little more grabbing, and really get the message of it that it was actually done beautifully. And the idea that Lucera's coming down and showing Yuna all the memories at one time, that must be a beautiful scene to try to see in CGI. But they apparently are at the bunker that we're so familiar with from the other chapters. But I'm gonna leave it there. I've already talked too much. I'm GK. Have a good day.